Hey, what is up? Welcome to this episode of the Wantrepreneur to Entrepreneur podcast. As always, I'm your host, Brian Lofrumento, and you know how excited I get for all of these episodes, but what gets me really excited is when a guest, everything I see about them is that they are so clear on the fact that good business makes the world a better place. And it is so clear to me that today's guest and fellow entrepreneur is really committed to helping businesses be the best that they can be so they can better serve the people that they work with, so that they can better serve their teams and have businesses that we would want to work at and work with. I am so excited because this is someone who has seen all different stages, all different scales of businesses. So we're going to learn a lot from him. So let me introduce you to today's guest. His name is Joel Perso. Joel is the founder of Growth Centric, which is a fractional executive company helping business owners execute. Joel has led businesses to triple-digit annual growth into 8-figure acquisitions, and he is a 5-time Inc. 5000 COO. He believes that the world needs entrepreneurs and that people deserve to work for great companies. And trust me, we're going to talk about what scale looks like. We're going to talk about all those turning points along the way to growth with someone who absolutely loves geeking out about this stuff. So I'm excited about this. I'm not going to say anything else. Let's dive straight into my interview with Joel Perso. All right, Joel, I am so very excited that you're here with us today. First things first, welcome to the show.
Awesome. Thank you. I'm happy to be here. I'm a fan.
Oh, thank you so much, Joel. Well, I am excited to see how much you love geeking out about business because I absolutely, obviously love it. And so it's going to be a fun one, but let's start with you personally. Take us beyond the bio. Who's Joel? How'd you start doing all these cool things?
Yeah, so my background is residential real estate brokerage operations. My very first job in real estate was as a transaction coordinator on a small team, like 5 real estate agents and me. I was the only organized one, the only analytical one. So I just started absorbing more and more responsibilities, took over marketing, took over operations, took over finance. And as that team grew, I just kind of grew with it. So that was really my first exposure to what the inside of running a business looks like. And started a brokerage with my first team leader. We became partners. We grew that to a little over $2 million in revenue. And for the 4 years after that, I spent with a company called VRX Media, which is a real estate media and marketing firm. So think drone videos, 3D tours, virtual staging, that kind of stuff. We scaled that from Milwaukee, Wisconsin to over 50 markets. We had over 200 photographers on staff. And that company got acquired by Zillow in 2022. After that, I spent a couple of years helping to grow a leadership team for a virtual assistant recruiting firm. And we got that business up to over eight figures in recurring revenue every year. And then about a year now, I've been running Growth Centric. So I stepped away from being an employee for most of my career to now being an entrepreneur and joining the ranks for you guys. So the big reasons that I said it's time for me to start something. You know, I'm 40 years old. I have a young son. I want the freedom that we all talk about with entrepreneurs. But the bigger part is that I've been a part of some really great companies and I've been a part of some not so great companies. And I believe that people deserve to work for great companies. I believe that most entrepreneurs want to make a great company, but it's hard. It's not just about growth. It's not just about revenue or net profit. There's a lot that goes into making a good company. And I want to help entrepreneurs do that. So that's really where Growth Centric came from.
Yeah, I love that overview, Joel, because there's one part of it that I really want to hone in on here to kick off our conversation, because I know we're going to go deep in so many different ways, but you highlighted the fact that when you first started out, you were wearing all of the hats. You were doing marketing, you were figuring out sales, you were figuring out the financial aspect of it. To me, that's what it means to be an entrepreneur, is that we always talk about all the different hats that we wear. I think it's that fundamental background that set you up for success in so many different ways. And of course, along the way, I mean, it's so clear in the trajectory of your career, you've managed to offload that, you've managed to hire that, you've managed to delegate a lot of those things, but you always kept and took with you that fundamental understanding of the overarching business. Talk to us about that, because in today's world, I feel like when we start our business, it's because we like being the practitioner of the thing that we're starting. If I'm a graphic designer and I start a graphic design agency, I like graphic designing. That's what I like to do. But now I have to do all of the things. Talk to us about that multiple hats that you had to wear and how that set you up for success.
Yeah, it really set me up for success in a different way than a lot of entrepreneurs, because at the time I was an employee, it was a pretty low stakes way for me to learn business. So in a small business, 6 people, doing a few $100,000 in revenue, there's not major human resources mistakes that I can really make. So I can learn a little bit about human resources in a low stakes, low risk environment. There's not major marketing mistakes that I can make that are going to, tank the company. So I got to learn all of these things, every part of the business, in a pretty low risk area. And that was incredibly valuable for me, because as a COO, I spent over 10 years leading each of these departments. And so having that exposure, being kind of a well-rounded business person, was incredibly valuable for my career. It's a little different when you're the entrepreneur from the get-go, right? The stakes are always higher. Little mistakes become big mistakes when you're the one writing the checks, when you're the one worried about making payroll. So, I'll fully admit that I got to do it in a pretty safe way, but it was incredibly valuable for me. So anybody who has a chance to work in a small business, you're almost by necessity going to pick up different functions in the business. And it's a great place to really learn quickly some different areas of the business.
Yeah, well said. I think that's such an important distinction. And that's why, it's in the very title of the show, Entrepreneur to Entrepreneur. I think there's advantages to both sides of that coin. And I think that your story is such a great example of the fact that while you are in entrepreneur mode, thinking about, hey, one day I'm going to start this, pick up those tools and skills along the way, which you very clearly did, Joel. And what I really like about what you picked up along the way is you learned so many lessons through the contrast. And I'm going to totally put you on the spot here to talk about that contrast between what you call great companies and not so great companies. What's the difference there?
Yeah, I think it all starts with clarity. And this is where I will always start with my clients on a fractional COO service, is it all starts with clarity. A lot of entrepreneurs have a big vision, but they struggle to articulate it. So first thing is always getting super clear on the vision, because we're going to do kind of, the right things in the right order. So it has to start with vision. A great company has a clear vision. People want to be a part of something special. Something I talk to, my entrepreneur clients about a lot, coming from somebody who was an employee for so long, is a lot of people want to be a part of something special. They want to be a part of something bigger than themselves, but you have to articulate that so that people can come along. One of the mistakes we make as entrepreneurs sometimes is we think, oh, well, I have to just kind of get lucky and find people who already share my vision. But the reality is you communicate the vision, you find people who get excited by that vision, and then they'll come along with you. So to be a great company, you have to have a big vision, and it has to be a vision that people are going to get excited about and want to come along on that journey with you. So vision, super critical. Second piece, strategy. And this is really where I start to help my clients execute. And strategy is, real simply getting clear on exactly what we're going to do to hit our big goals. And more importantly, what are we not going to do? So we see a lot of entrepreneurs, too many priorities, too many projects. We don't end up executing on anything effectively. So have to have great strategy, and then, have to be able to execute. And really, that's what my business is all about, helping us execute. How do we finish the things that we set out to do at a high level? And then a few other components. I think culture is really important. Communication throughout the organization is really important. And then ultimately, the team you build, the people are going to become, the kind of the DNA of the organization. So being able to attract, bring on board and retain great people, has to be part of it too.
Yeah, it's fun hearing you talk about these things, Joel, because I've been an entrepreneur for 17 years. So I know what it feels like being a total newbie. I know what it feels like sometimes feeling like I'm the old head in some entrepreneurial circles. But it's a really interesting vantage point to see how many entrepreneurs, we all suffer from things like imposter syndrome. We all suffer from having a zillion ideas that we want to take action on at all times. And I think a lot of us think that because of AI, we can simultaneously take action in 500 different ways, which you and I are definitely going to talk about AI today as well. But what I really want to put you on the spot for is the fact that listeners heard in your bio that you obviously work with so many 7-figure business owners. You've had 8-figure acquisitions. You've been on the Inc. 5000 list multiple times. And so hearing that scale that you've operated at, I know as a small business owner, it's easy to say, well, my goodness, of course it's easy for them to have big dreams. Of course it's easy for them to put strategy together because they have these teams. They have reliable revenue. A lot of cases they have have funding, they have all of these different things that I don't have. And we use that as an excuse. We use that to talk ourselves out of having these fundamental elements. So, Joel, I'm going to ask you to speak directly to our audience that might be feeling that way and thinking, I'm just not at that level yet, Joel. Is it the chicken or the egg? Do we have to start acting like that before we get to that level? How do we navigate those early days?
Yeah, the chicken or the egg question is a good question. And the unsatisfying answer is it's kind of both at different times. Yes, you have to have a clear vision, in the beginning, I believe, but you don't have to have every detail of your business 10 years from now mapped out. You do have to have strategy early on, because that's what's going to give you the ability to focus on the most important things. And so when we talk about, we got to have all these things, I got to have great, hiring and onboarding processes. I got to have, great marketing and lead generation processes. Yeah, eventually we got to have all those things, but there's going to be a kind of order of importance. And so if we're early in the business, if it's still just you, solopreneur stage, it's all about sales. We got to make the cash register ring. And so the fact that maybe you don't have a great onboarding system for employees yet, that's okay, right? We have to focus on sales. If we don't make sales, if we don't have cash flow generating, the business is going to die. So there's this element of like, give yourself some grace with the things that you don't have yet, because you just have to focus on the most important pieces. And so that's why I would say it's that if everything else, we're going to wait a little bit on, it'd be strategy and execution, because we have to be really clear on what we're going to do to get to our goals, and then we just have to execute relentlessly. So for most small businesses, again, that's sales in the beginning. If we don't have enough people to talk to, then it's marketing, and that bottleneck never goes away in business. It just moves to different places. So once we get enough customers, now we have a fulfillment bottleneck, and we have to solve that. And we have to solve retention. And then now we're back to having a traffic problem again. So that never ends. It's one of the things that makes, business exciting. But the short answer to that question is, at every point in business, you have to be focused on what's most important right now. And that changes, the larger you get, and changes with cycles. But if you can focus on what's the most important thing I can do right now, you can get a long way.
I want to go deeper there, because a lot of people hearing that, well, I'll call this out for you publicly, is that a big reason why our team reached out to you to invite you to come onto the show is, Joel, so frequently in your messaging, I see that strong emphasis on execution. And it almost feels funny talking about an execution problem in entrepreneurial circles, because we almost have a case of the fact that we're willing to work too much as entrepreneurs. We are fueled by excitement. We're fueled by passion. We're fueled by really strong work ethics in most cases across the board. And so to talk about the fact that we have execution problems, it really makes me want to ask, why? Is it that we want to do too much? You keep talking about focus. Is it that we're focusing on the wrong things? Is it shiny object syndrome just manifesting itself in today's world? Why is it that so many business owners and C-level executives have that execution problem in their businesses?
Yeah, there's two main reasons. The first one is just too many priorities. We're working on too many things. We're not going to be able to effectively execute on 7 different priorities at once. In a perfect world, you could choose one thing every quarter to execute at a high level. More realistically, two or 3 priorities. But Jim Collins said, if you have more than 3 priorities, you don't have any. And I totally agree with that. I think that's spot on. There's in every business, maybe except for Apple, there's a limited amount of time, money, and energy, and you got to deploy those resources narrowly and effectively. And so too many priorities is the number one reason we fail with execution. And the second reason for entrepreneurs, especially in the early stages of business, is once you execute on something, that thing, whatever it is, needs to be managed, and you have to delegate the management after you execute. Otherwise, you've built a bunch of stuff, you've implemented a bunch of stuff, but now you're still managing it all, and it becomes untenable really quickly. That's where we see, hey, we built something great, but it's not really working. Or we see a lot, hey, we execute on it, and I checked back in a couple months, and I found out that the team wasn't doing it, or it wasn't happening the way it was supposed to be. That's because you're not delegating the management of it. So what's tracking look like? What's reporting look like? What's the cadence of accountability look like? Some things we need to look at once a year. Some things we need to look at once a week. But once we execute, Now we have to manage. And as an entrepreneur, you have to delegate the management of the things that we executed on. Otherwise, you get overwhelmed and things start falling off. So that's the second big reason.
Joel, I knew that you would make our listeners think bigger, and I think this is such a clear example of you doing that, because you didn't come on the air today saying, hey, we need to start delegating better, because that's level one, is we have to delegate the things, the actual practice of what we do in our business. Now you're saying we have to delegate the management of those things, which I feel like the natural question at that level is, then what's our goal, Justin or Joel, as business owners, as CEOs and founders? What's our goal then become when we just start delegating not only the things, but also delegating the management of the things?
Yeah, I'll back into answering that question. So as a COO for most of my career, now as an entrepreneur who's offering COO services, the most succinct definition that I really like of a COO role is protecting you from the day-to-day. So as the CEO, as the entrepreneur, I don't want you stuck in the day-to-day as much as possible. I want you coming up with the big ideas, focusing on the most important relationships. I want you communicating the vision regularly to the company. I want you leading the leaders in the organization. I don't want you stuck in the day-to-day. It's not the best use of your time, and it's not the best thing for the company. There's two mindset shifts that we have to help entrepreneurs make a lot of times. One is, it's okay for you not to be doing all of the tasks in the business, wearing all of the hats. The second mindset shift is, it's actually better for the business if you're not wearing all of those hats. It's better for the business if you're focused on growth, and then the team can focus on the day-to-day. So I actually want you out of the day-to-day as much as possible. And that's a tough transition to make when you started off doing everything. You were building the automations for the email campaign. You were signing up for the new lead generation. You were writing the newsletter. You were doing everything. It's a hard transition to make when you had a lot of tasks that were easy to see and mark off the list. When you move that over into, hey, there's much more leadership responsibility, much more strategic responsibility, but that's where we need you. That's where we need your entrepreneur instincts. That's where we need your ability to take risks. That's where we need your big picture thinking. That's where we need your ideas. Yes, we have to decide which of the ideas we're going to execute on at which time, but we need those ideas. So I want you out of the day-to-day. I want you big picture. I want you driving the company forward and chasing the vision. And I want you to let the team take care of all the details.
Joel, I'd love for you to take us behind the scenes into what that executive function looks like, because I have found over 17 years, I've tried everything, Joel, in so many different ways. Many things that I've found, obviously, my flow at this point, they work for me. For example, I love prompts. If I have thought prompts, I mean, you just got to get me started, and then this engine never stops running. And so I'll go in 50 different directions from one prompt. But what I also really like about the mass adoption of AI these days is a lot of my executive time, Joel, I sit down with ChatGPT and I'm bouncing my ideas off of it. I'm having it challenge me. I'm having it add on to those ideas. I'm being forced to really justify and go deeper into exploring a lot of these ideas. I don't need a fellow human in those moments. Now, of course, the stuff that rises to the top, I bring it to our teams internally, and then I measure it that way and have them bounce things off of me as well. But I find that the better questions I'm asked, or the better questions I ask of myself, the better answers, of course, I start coming up with. So I guess, what does that executive time look like in your mind and in your experiences? And what sort of questions can we kick things off to start that executive thought train?
Yeah, I mean, I love that you said that, because I think having that dedicated critical thinking time for a CEO, for an entrepreneur, is really important, and using AI to be more effective at that is a great use of AI. So I think that's a wonderful but difficult for a lot of people idea to get there on. Is like, a lot of what I want you to do as a CEO is be thinking of ideas, thinking of what we could do next, how we can improve things, how we can grow, what other big accounts might be out there, big partnerships be out there. And to give that some more direction, we got to tie it back to the vision again, and tie it back to the strategy. And sometimes my clients are rolling their eyes at me when we talk about this stuff. But if we're clear on the vision, again, we know where we're going. So we're gonna weigh our ideas, weigh these things that we're that we're working through against the vision. Is this thing going to get us where we want to go? And then we're going to weigh it against the strategy. Does this thing help execute our strategy right now? We came up with a couple, 2-3 quarterly priorities. Does this thing help right now, or is this maybe something that goes on the backlog for next quarter, or even next year? And so, the prioritization is always a tricky piece, and that's a really important skill to develop for a leadership team and for a CEO. But yeah, I love it that you're spending time thinking and then testing those ideas. One of the challenges with entrepreneurs like yourself, and probably like a lot of the audience, is we're usually not picking between good ideas and bad ideas. We're usually picking between a bunch of good ideas, and that's where we take on more than we can execute, or we have too many priorities, too many projects. It's because they are all good ideas. I used to joke with my last CEO, is there was 1 in 100 ideas that he had that I could say, that's legitimately a terrible idea, and I get to shoot it down right now. The rest of them were good ideas, and now we have to decide, does this fit in with our current strategy? Does it fit in with our vision? And is it something we can do right now, or is that something we need to put off for next quarter, next year?
Joel, I've got to ask you this, because I'm sure a lot of listeners are hearing the way, to me, it feels like you're very objective in the way that you think about these things, because I think you've always had a really interesting seat at the table that gives you such a valuable vantage point. And I think that inside all of our businesses, that's what we need. I often say on the air, you can't read a label from inside the jar. And we all know that that's true. But I know a lot of listeners are also thinking, Joel, cool that you get to show up as a COO, not only in your career to date, but also in your business. You get to do that with your clients. I can't afford a COO. That's a luxury that I don't have. I want to directly put the spotlight on growth centric, because you obviously feel very strongly about the fractional model. So I'd love for you to talk to listeners about that, because I think that's the entire point behind the fractional model, is that it is making this level. Again, I just want to toot your horn a little bit. 5-time Inc. 5000 COO, and you're making that more accessible to so many other businesses. Why that fractional model? Why are you so convinced that this is the way forward?
Yeah, there's two big trends that kind of set up what I think is going to be a huge trend over the next 10 years, especially in small business, which is fractional leadership. The first one is kind of the rise of the virtual assistant, which really supercharged in COVID. So COVID happens, a lot of the world shut down, a lot of really, really talented people in countries all over the world kind of became available for remote work. And then pretty quickly, because we all learned that we could work remotely if we had to, the adoption rate of virtual assistants is skyrocketed. So now we can have really talented virtual help in our business for, in some cases, a fraction of what it would cost to hire US help. So we started to see a little bit of a shift in how we think about hiring and how we think about staffing our businesses because of virtual assistants. So, unlocking the global workforce, so to speak, was the first trend. Some industries have been quicker to adopt that than others. Real estate, early adopter with virtual assistants, high ticket sales, coaching, consulting agencies, early adopters, obviously a lot of software companies, early adopters, but we're seeing it become more and more mainstream. And the second big trend is AI, like what you already hit on. The amount of stuff that we're going to be able to get done with AI is going to reduce the workload, which is going to reduce headcount in some cases, which is going to reduce management burden. And so we're not going to need full-time executives, C-suite executives, as soon as we typically do in the business. The trick is that even though we're not going to need full-time help, we're still going to need some of the skills that those executives bring. So for my example, there's a sticking point in businesses where you need higher level execution, but you also need to be reinvesting in growth. And so can you afford to take, 150 to 250 grand and hire a full-time COO right now, when you should be investing that money back in growing the business? But your really great admin or assistant that you have, or maybe even your really great operations manager, isn't quite at the level to help you execute the way you need to. And so that's where fractional really, really shines in small business. Is I need to be investing in my growth, but I need higher level strategic and execution help in the business. A fractional executive is perfect for that. We've seen fractional CFOs be a really common thing for the last 10 years. We're starting to see fractional CMOs, COOs, CTOs. And I think that trend is just going to continue, because I can bring a ton of value into your business in a few hours a week for, again, a fractional cost of what it would take to bring on full-time leadership.
Yeah, I really appreciate that overview. I totally agree with you. I mean, we see it even in the guests that we reach out to invite here onto the show, is that it's cool. And also, Joel, I would argue that it's part of your superpower is you are not just inside of one business. You are taking all of the good things from different industries, from different business sizes, from different business models, and you're really able to apply that across the board. So I just think it strengthens the fractional skill set as well. And it allows us as business owners to take all those experiences from you and applied inside of our own businesses. I knew that time would fly by with you today, but I want to squeeze in two more questions because I've noticed so much of your professional experience and also part of how you help people think strategically about their business and their future is focusing on the exit. And I don't think we have this conversation often enough in entrepreneurial circles. So, Joel, what does that look like? When should we start focusing on an exit? Is it something we plan for? Is it something we aspire towards? Is it something we can strategize for? What's your approach to that when you help CEOs navigate that?
Yeah, I think thinking about it early on is really important because you need to do some things accordingly. Again, with the part of the vision is are you going to do this for the rest of your life? Are you trying to grow as quickly as possible and exit now? Do you have a number in mind? So getting all the way back to, again, the vision and the clarity piece is super important. It's also important to, this idea of, building good companies. A lot of that has to do with how you treat people. And so, your plans as an entrepreneur and business owner, I feel like it's good to share that with your team early on. One of the things I really appreciated about my last CEO was he was, hey, we're building this thing and the goal is to sell for 100 million. And he was super clear about that with every hire that we made. That's what we're building to. And we had incentives based around that as team members, which can be a really valuable thing. But thinking about the exit, what I love about thinking about exits is in a lot of ways, it forces you to do things the right way. It forces you to have good systems in place. It forces you to have good documentation in place because whoever's going to acquire your business wants to see that it's running smoothly, that we have systems, processes. Forces you to have a focus on retention. Another thing that somebody acquiring a business is going to look for is how long has the management team been in place? What does employee turnover look like? And then it forces you, which is tough for a lot of us entrepreneurs, it forces you to start earlier with delegating and getting things off your plate so that the business doesn't rely on you. Nobody wants to buy a business where the founder is still crucial to daily operations and our success. So there's principles behind it, right? We got to have clean books. We have to have good systems. We have to have good hiring processes. We have to have a focus on retention. We have to have a focus on getting the founder out of the day-to-day, and so the business doesn't rely on them anymore. So there's principles, like so many areas of business, there's principles behind how you prepare for an exit. And the good news is a lot of those principles that are going to help you have a successful exit are also going to help you have a successful business in the meantime. So in that way, it's almost never too soon to start thinking about an exit because the things you want to put in place for a successful exit are the same principles that are going to help you run a successful business, which is an exciting piece of it.
Yeah, Joel, I will say this, obviously in 1,300 plus episodes, I've in various ways talked about exit strategies with incredibly visionary founders such as yourself who have been in the arena and guided companies through those acquisitions. But the way that you just articulated that, it's probably the first time that I've really viewed it as a very healthy thought experiment for all of us, whether we plan on exiting or not. I mean, you hit the nail. You really hammered it home at the end there about the fact that it's healthy business. The things that set you up for a future acquisition or sale or exit, those are the very things that create a healthy and sustainable business. So I really love that. That's one thing I'm definitely going to take away from our conversation, but I'm only going to put you on the spot one more time here, and it's a super broad question, and that is, what's your best piece of advice for listeners? I feel like you've made us think bigger in so many interesting ways here today, and you have to remember we're being listened to by both entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs at all different stages of their own growth journeys. So as a fellow entrepreneur yourself, what's that one piece of advice you want to leave them with today?
One piece of advice, but it applies a little differently for the entrepreneurs and the entrepreneurs. And it's get really clear on the goal, and then we can reverse engineer it. So for the entrepreneur, if it's starting the business finally, get really clear on what needs to happen in order for you to take that leap. And then we can reverse engineer it all the way down to what we need to do today and this week and this month. And then same thing for the entrepreneurs who are already in the arena, like you say, is get really clear clarity is everything in business. Get clear on where you want to go, and then we can reverse engineer it and build it.
Yes. Oh, I love that advice. Joel, you just make me want to go to work from here. So I'm super grateful for that. I know how many people are going to feel exactly as I do right now in this moment about how excited they are about the future of their company. And I just want to say that, listeners, the whole reason why we invited Joel on is because it's not just the stuff he said here on the air today. Everywhere you're going to find Joel online, you're going to find this sort of messaging, this sort of emphasis on building a truly great company and all the meanings that come with that. So as soon as you land on his website, you're going to see how much he just loves building these great businesses. So Joel, you definitely owe us some links right now for listeners who want to go deeper into all the great things that you're doing. Where should they go from here?
Yeah, connect with me on our website. It's thegrowthcentric.com. You can find me on Facebook, Facebook/Joel Perso. And then if you just want to connect on email and grab some time to talk, I'd love to do that. Joel@thegrowthcentric.com.
Yes, and listeners, you already know the drill. We're making it as easy as possible for you to find those links down below in the show notes, no matter where it is that you're tuning into today's episode. If you're driving, if you're in the shower, who knows where you're listening to us. Don't worry about remembering it. Don't worry about spelling or anything like that. Just scroll down. You can click right on through from the show notes wherever it is that you're tuning in. So, Joel, on behalf of myself and all the listeners worldwide, thanks so much for coming on the show today.
This was a blast. Thank you.